Right. Christine, I'll try and make up a bit of time. I'm sorry, I've completely wrecked your schedules there. So we're aiming roughly for 3:30, right, for coffee. So that's 40 minutes. I'll do my best. Give me a sort of 5-minute, 10-minute thing if I start rattling on. I'll do my best. So, okay, 10 to 3. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Alan. I'm from Bristol. And why marketers don't get hugged at parties and other useful things about social marketing. You've heard a lot of useful things about social marketing already. There may be moments where I will look at this and think, that's already been said, in which case I will sort of go quicker. Or there may be moments where I think maybe I've got something sort of new today to say, in which case I'll sort of labour the point a little bit more, if you get my drift. Right, so what's going on? So let's chat. What's my argument for this talk? Is that, is asking some questions really. How are we being social marketers, how are we regarded by others? What's our brand, to use a marketing term? How are we perceived? What are we famous for? And perhaps what should we be famous for? Okay? Is there some confusion out there? Is there a certain wariness about social marketers out there? Questions. A little bit personal experiential, so if you're looking for lots of numbers, look elsewhere. But I'll be happy to sort of debate it. It's a little bit, I can be a bit opinionated at times, which hopefully is a good thing, and I'm easily swatted away like a little fly. I do hate conflict, so if you start saying, Alan, I don't agree, I will immediately agree with you. So my argument is that we're kind of, it's very similar to Sharon's point this morning, that too often we're seen as tactical messengers by the outside world, and in fact we've got some serious contributions we can make, which I'll come on to. I'm also arguing we could go back to our roots as a campaigner. We could be more political, we could be more campaigny, we could get stuck in, roll our sleeves up. There's a social battle of ideas out there, and we can sort of get our hands on that. We've got skills and we've got knowledge embedded inside our profession. So let's think about this as a profession, social marketing as a profession versus other professions and other ways of sort of doing things. But first, let's get the hug issue sorted out. So I am married. I love public health people, by the way. So any of you that work in public health, big love. And I love you so much that I am actually married to a public health professional. And every now and again, I say to Jane, Jane, I'm thinking of saying something like X in a talk I'm giving to public health people. She says, Alan, if you do that, they will kill you. Don't say that. And I say, oh. So let's try and unravel that. What's the problem? What's the Jane problem with Alan? In fact, there's a lot of Jane problems with Alan. But what's the main Jane problem with Alan? And the apple, okay, public health approach is to talk about the health benefits of the apple. And the marketing approach is to sort of say, let's chop the apple up, and then people will be more likely to eat it, which is kind of technically true. But it makes us look like devious bastards a little bit. You know, it's a little bit, it's got that little whiff of manipulation already. Because what's this business of chopping up the apple? Well, hang on a moment. What are we doing? And we're sort of bypassing, what we're doing is bypassing cognition, as you know, right? This is a nudge technique, isn't it? The apple choppy-uppy thing. So is that a little bit, are we, when we're doing that with our 3-year-old daughter, which is what I did with Rhiannon all those years ago, and I just felt a tiny twinge of guilt as she ignored the big apple, and then I chopped up the apple, and then she started eating it. I thought, what am I doing? Am I trying to manipulate my own child? What kind of person am I? So we need to sort of think a little bit, I suppose, about whether or not that kind of, impacts on the marketing professional. I mean, it didn't take me long to find this cartoon on the internet. All right, I Googled marketing, marketers don't get hugged or something, I Googled. And that's, and then we found that quite quickly, all right? So so that's the thing, firefighters, right, get hugged at parties. Maybe you all get hugged at parties. Nurses get hugged at parties. But I'm contending that all too often, Marketers don't get hugged at parties. At which point, Julia Verne, when she's in the audience, she's a public health professional in Public Health England. She's quite senior. She runs up out of the audience and gives me this big hug, which is really nice. She's done it twice now. So, so that's the hug issue, is are we, what? What? Oh, I see, there's a queue. All right. Well, this is most unexpected. That's the sort of, I am contending there's a problem. Houston, we've got a problem here. Does this matter, right? So does it matter? I mean, Kate Hudson says, never worry about bad press. So if marketers have a bad press, all that matters is if they spell your name right. So does it matter? All publicity is good publicity? It kind of might matter because we might not get invited to the party in the first place. So what I've found as a researcher is sometimes I look at what funders fund. I'm trying to be careful and diplomatic here. I look at what people fund across the United Kingdom, which is my domain, obviously. Maybe things are different here, right? And I notice with interest that they tend to fund certain groups and certain people, and that social marketers, there's only a handful of us, but we don't tend to get invited to be co-eyes, to be co-investigators as much as we should be in those research things. Anyway, interesting thing, just a little observation, and I don't want to sound chippy, right? Because, that's the danger here, is that you sound a bit stroppy. So I'm trying to keep it light. So what are we famous for? What is it that marketers are what is it that social marketers are sort of seen as doing? On the bus on the way here, sorry, Christine, this is too good a story to miss. This conference, and on the radio was on the bus, and then it was Galway radio, and then it was bing, bang, bang, and headline item. So obviously Christine and colleagues done a job brilliantly in terms of writing the press release and getting this conference into the radio. Well, bang, bang. So tomorrow, I'm not going to do an Irish accent because I'm rubbish. So tomorrow there's going to be a social and there's going to be a social media conference in Galway tomorrow, and it's behaviour change, blah 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 blah. So social media, blah 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 blah. That was the radio broadcast yesterday. I've been introduced. This is Professor Alan Tapp, and he's going to be our talker today on, and he's going to talk to you about social media. So over to you, Alan, to talk about. I think Twitter and Facebook are really important, and So over to you, Alan. And then I'm like, okay, hi everyone, thanks Compare. Twitter and Facebook are quite important. That's social media. I'm going to talk to you about social marketing, and then that social media, and I try and sort of reverse engineer my moment because the whole thing's been thrown into confusion. So I don't know if that's happened to yourselves or other speakers, but that's happened to me. Maybe it's just me. It's happened twice. If you Google social marketing, the first 30 or 40 hits are social media organizations. I'm contending, now I ran this past my fellow speakers over dinner last night, and it was fair to say it didn't sell many tickets, right? But here's my idea. I think we should drop the title, social marketing. If Philip Kotler's, he's going to roast me with a torch, blowtorch or something. I think we should drop it, and I think we should become marketing, something like marketing for behaviour change or public health marketing or something like that, because I think we've lost the battle. Anyway, I'll move on quickly. I can feel some rotten tomatoes. And the splat effect, this is I ran the Bristol Social Marketing Centre for a little while, and great fun it was too. And the phone would ring quite often from local NHS organisations, National Health, and they would say, hi, Alan, I need some help with we're thinking of doing some posters and leaflets and ads and things, and I could do with some help, kind of thinking through what to put on the leaflets and the posters. And then at the start, I'd say, well, no, that's a terrible idea, because you need to think about strategies and and where you fit in the behaviour change world and theory and blah, blah. And there was always a silence on the other end of the phone. And then the phone would ring the next day. Oh, hello, Alan, we're thinking of doing some leaflets and posters. Can you help us? Yes, I can help you. I changed my tune completely. Yes, I can help. And I'd go in, and then I'd reverse engineer this problem, starting from the leaflets and the posters, which is the last place you go to, as you know, and then going back upstream. Does any of this ring true? And then eventually you arrive at the point where the client is kind of, oh, right. Oh, start with the customer, right. And you, and you'd have to go, bip, which is fair enough. I'm not trying to, but it is a problem. So that's the splat effect. And I'm still finding the splat effect now. It's, as far as I'm concerned, not much has changed. Once you move out two differential steps away from the sort of inner core of professional social marketing or professional or public health people who've been really exposed to social marketing and know what it is, fine. Well, once you go a couple of steps away, in the world I work in a lot, road safety world, I do a lot of work on road safety and speed limits, car, driver behavior, and I can assure you they haven't a Scooby-Doo what social marketing is, and they think it's splat. And that's a problem. Does any of that matter? Does the splat thing matter? Does the social media thing matter? I think it does matter, because too often you end up down the wrong behavior change route. That's why it matters. Who cares if social marketers get put out of business? Well, that's sad for us, but that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is you end up down the wrong behavior change route. You end up down this potentially, if you're not careful, you end up down this route. And particularly in the fields I work in, it is frightening how often you get people who they're highly paid professional people, and they think if you just tell people, then they'll do what you say. They will drive more slowly, or they will abandon their cars and use public transport. And all you need to do is tell them. Just fill them with facts, and that'll work. And as we know, it doesn't. So that's why some of this is important. Mentioned road safety. I had the privilege of being at the Scottish Parliament on Monday, talking about 20-mile-an-hour limits that Scotland is thinking of introducing as a default speed limit for residential areas. Ladies and gentlemen, I commend 20-mile-an-hour limits to you, not for road safety reasons, but for public health reasons. And we can talk about that another time. But isn't it fascinating? This is Alan Tapp, and Alan's come all the way up from Bristol to Edinburgh to talk to us in the Scottish Parliament about 20 limits. And Alan's written a report for us, and he's going to talk to us about educational approaches. I'd written a social marketing technical report for the MSP, Mark, and he's a really bright bloke. He's a really clever guy. And he said, and he'd read the report. I know he'd read the report. And then he said it's an educational report. He couldn't bring himself to use the M word. I thought that was an absolutely fascinating little moment on Monday. That was this week. So what's going on? Just asking some questions here. What's going on? So, what should we be famous for? What should we be famous for? We've heard a lot of great stuff today that I think has explained what good social marketing looks like. And as long as we can identify it, and as long as we can continue to spread that word, then maybe we're kind of getting there. But I also wonder whether we've got a brand problem and a brand campaign that we need to do ourselves, And to be fair to him, Alan Andreasen many years ago wrote a paper, didn't he, called Marketing Social Marketing. So we've got a marketing, and we've recently been out-marketed by the behavioral economics boom that has come through in the last few years. How ironic that we've been out-marketed by a bunch of economists. I cannot believe it. But there you are. Let's get our heads around that. And to be fair to them, there's a nice clear thing about that automatic cognitive split. I do like that, and I really like that. And I'm not sure we quite nailed that before they came along. So that's fair enough. But I think we could step up in terms of branding our profession and so on. So back to design. Social marketers are designers. When people ask me what is social marketing, and they ask me that an awful lot, I say we are designers. That is the first thing I say. I do not say anything before I say that. We are designers. We are injected into the ring at the heart of Mordor. We are not the frippery around the edges. We are the injection mold for the thing itself. You can call it product or whatever you want to call it. The core proposition, the thing, the behavior change thing. We're right in the heart of that. Not owning it, We're not necessarily controlling it, but we're part of the conversation of the ring at the heart of Mauder. And what I'm talking about, education is important, design is important, control is important, and support is important. Those things are big things. They're big, powerful engine rooms of behavior change. Put together, they're really, really powerful. Put together with marketing, you really are kicking along. So this design thing is important. I think I'm arguing something slightly new today in debating with you that we are navigators. There are pilots. We can sometimes be pilots, and we can also be navigators through a complicated world. How complicated is that? Don't know how well you can see that. It's a slide I love putting up. I've put it up many times, and it's a beautiful thing. Anyone know what that is? Oh, you're so clever. Right on it. That's very good. It is the cause effect. Of course, you work in systems here, right? The penny's just dropped. You're going to know. All right. Sorry, Christine. You're way ahead of me on that. So, you have a real... By the way, that is fantastic. I'm such a fan from afar of the systems thinking. It's just bloody hard to make it work, but you're making it work. And I don't know many other people that are doing what you're doing, so I'm going off piste here, but well done. I think that's really good. It's a lot of hard work going into that. Anyway, this the business of navigation is the business of being like I see behavior change solutions as a bit like as complicated as a Rubik's Cube, right? And you, the systems thinkers, doing your Rubik's Cube thing to end up with all the blues and the reds and I don't think it's simple. One of my favorite phrases in life is everything is complicated. And certainly things like obesity, it is complicated. Is anyone in doubt that stuff's complex? And therefore it implies that there are complex solutions to this. It's not simple. It doesn't mean we can't do one thing, but it does mean it's complicated, doesn't it? So somebody needs to navigate that. Now, we're potentially well placed to navigate. Navigation. A whole load of different things, like a Rubik's Cube or like a systems, wheels that are all moving around. This is complicated. Nobody, to my knowledge, has nailed yet what this navigation trick is that we need to be able to pull off over the next few years in order to start making our behavior change more and more and more effective. We are getting there, thanks to many people in the room and this morning's speakers, Walter and Sharon, who talked about their work and the kind of complex work that they're doing. We're starting to push this science forward. But I think marketers are well placed to do something. Do we need a chief executive of behavior change? Do we need like a CEO? Do we need MBAs in changing behavior or behavioral influence? Cross-disciplinary MBAs in this kind of work. I don't see why not. It feels pretty complicated to me. And I think that we are being criticised a lot from the outside world. In the UK, the House of Lords Review a few years ago criticised the entire sector for working in silos. We work separately and we don't talk to each other enough. And the evidence base for behaviour change is really clear. If you work together with other professions, you are much more likely to have bigger impact. Multidisciplinary approaches. So do we need a chief executive to hover above all that and make decisions for us? Look at that. Do we need a chief executive of behaviour change to navigate our way through this? We need science. Do we need an independent arbiter? Now, in marketing, we've got strategic planning processes that help us. Who here has got classical marketing training, a master's? This is second bread and butter to us, isn't it? Strategic planning process. These things are powerful things that we can bring to the table and we can do things with. And it helps avoid having the wool pulled over our eyes by people who, under the guise of being academically independent, are selling a particular solution. The answer's nudge. Now, what was your question? You know, I've got a problem with that. I've got a problem with that because there's money involved, and there's people making money here under the guise of independent scientific advice. I'm afraid I do have a problem. And I think that we can do better, and I think we can do better by having well-trained, well-armed, savvy, knowledgeable, and skillful senior people saying, you know what, nudge, you've got a, you know what, social marketing, you've got a place, education, you've got a place, law, legal, legislation, engineering, technology, training, you've all got, here's your spot, but don't pull the wool over my eyes and try and sell me your particular solution. So, motoring on, number 3 of our solution, of our what should we be famous for solutions, are we campaigners? Well, of course we are. We always have been. This is how we sort of started. We're back to the future in a way with persuasive comms, and we've got a lot that we've got a lot of contribution that we can potentially make. We've got some problems out there in terms of a slightly alarming sort of rise of propaganda techniques that's going on in the world at the moment. Propaganda's everywhere. I've certainly seen it in Ireland over the last couple of days. It's everywhere, and it's really clear. You know, I'm obviously not going to make any points or take any sides, but I note with interest the propaganda techniques that are currently being deployed. And of course, there's propaganda all over this slide. And at the bottom left there is the wonderful Aaron Banks, who bankrolled UKIP and bankrolled the Leave campaign for the UK. And that's his house behind him, and I know that's his house because I cycle past it every day on my way to Bristol to where I work, and I throw a tomato into Aaron's. Aaron said, I can tell you where his house is, by the way, if you need to. And anyway, so Banks, he's a very, very wealthy man, is Aaron Banks, and he hired the US political strategy firm Goddard Gunster on a multi-million-pound fee to sharpen the Leave campaign's message. And he said, Aaron Banks has written a book on all of this, and he said what Goddard Gunster said early on was facts don't work, and that's it. The Remain campaign featured fact, 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 fact. It just doesn't work. You've got to connect with people emotionally. It's the Trump success. So, interesting. Interesting. Earlier, much, much earlier, you've got the Communist Party of the Soviet Union book written by Leonard Shapiro, who was an expert on Stalinism, and he warned us that, and this is, I think, is even more interesting, the true object of propaganda is neither to convince nor even to persuade, but to produce a uniform pattern of public utterances in which the first trace of unorthodox thought reveals itself as a jarring dissonance. Or in plain English, change the norms, change the norm of the discourse, and you change the people. And this is chatting earlier with speakers about this. It is frighteningly easy to do. It's terrifyingly easy. So we live in interesting times. Now, from what to who? Who's doing this stuff? Of course, toxic marketing is out there, commercial marketing. This is why we don't get hugged at parties, right? Jane says, Alan, there's still a whiff of industry about you. You know, oh, I don't want there to be a whiff of industry. I want to be loved. And, but she said, no, it's not going to happen, mate. So the commercial, the sort of commercial thing, I'm jesting a little bit. The commercial skills that we've learned are really, they're absolutely vital to bring to the party. So if we don't get hugged, so what? As long as we're listened to. So it's just important we get listened to. But toxic marketing, commercial determinants of health. Strategies and approaches used by the private sector to promote products and choices that are detrimental to health. The commercial determinants of health. That's really, really interesting stuff. It's fairly new to me. I mean, Gerard is a world expert on this, and we'll talk to you next. But this is really interesting stuff to think about. I think about this when I think about Tesco. When I shop in Tesco, which, as you know, is a large supermarket in the UK. And good old Tesco say that our values are set by our customers. They tell us whether they are happy with what we are doing. Our values are set by our customers. Right, think about that for 5 seconds. It's rubbish, isn't it? It's patent nonsense, and we should expose this at every opportunity. When I'm a customer of Tesco, I am shopping. I'm not in value mode, although I try to be. Yes, I do my best to buy fair trade coffee, and I bet you do too. And yes, I might think, and yeah, I might have some sort of cognitive sort of thing going on while I'm tootling around the shops, trying to be a good citizen. But by and large, I'm shopping, and I just want to get in, get the stuff, and go. And I'm not trying to question Tesco's values, but I'm questioning them now. You know, that is market reasoning used as propaganda. It's no better than that. Entertainment and media industry. These lovely 3 guys are the authors of the world's most successful TV franchise globally of all time. This beats Friends, this beats Cheers, this beats Sex and the City, this beats Frasier. I mean, come on. This is the biggest thing in the world. Top Gear. It's clever stuff. They're very talented presenters. But what's going on here? Car-dominant sort of society? I mean, so is there a propaganda element to this? Did they mean to do propaganda-y stuff when they started? I doubt it. They were just 3 boys having fun and trying to make money and getting on the telly. That's fine. So what are they doing now? I think that there's a fairly coherent or semi-coherent component here, particularly in the case of Jeremy Clarkson, of politicising this. Cars are great things, cars are good. Anything that talks about walking and cycling or anything else is bad, and so on and on and on. We're all left-wing tree huggers, and we should be taken no notice of, and he speaks for the majority. So there's a false, if you like your social psychology, Jeremy Clarkson is the archdeacon of false consensus. You know, we've got to be careful about this. So people think he carries the majority. I've done loads of surveys on car dominance and speed limits and things. Most people support speed limits. Most people support the idea of extra funding for walking and cycling across population level surveys done by YouGov. So I know what the real figures are, and they're the opposite to what is pushed here. So we've got to be careful about what's happening. Political determinants of health. So we've had commercial, entertainment, and politics. So what's happening with the political determinants? Well, ideologies can get in the way of behaviour change because behavioural change, behavioural influence is inherently political. The whole notion of intervening, where does the word intervention come from in the public health? The whole idea of intervening is political. It's progressive, it's intervening. And conservative thinking says you don't intervene, you leave it, because then you're impinging on people's freedom. So the word freedom is it's an explosive propaganda word, freedom. And it's important, every time you hear the F word, it's an alarm bell going off in your mind. Because people get sucked into that. It's so powerful. We all love it. It's such a powerful word, but it's used to divert and to deceive. So, okay, how do we fight back, troops? Fighting back against fake news. First thing we've got to do is understand and expose what we're dealing with. Identify and expose the techniques. I've read a few books on propaganda in the last few years, and it's absolutely fascinating stuff. And I would recommend that exercise. I think what it does is it really we were chatting over lunch about media studies degrees, and how in media studies degrees they teach this stuff. Anyone done a media studies? But they teach the business of critical exposure. I mean, how interesting is that? So you understand what you're reading, you hover above it, and you can expose a technique, a persuasion technique, and identify it, pin it down, eliminate it from your thinking, not be deceived yourself by it. Start telling other people what the propaganda technique is. In the world of cycling, which is one of my loves, this stuff happens a lot. Cycling is one of the last legal prejudices. Being anti-cyclist, see the ist thing there, is one of the last legal prejudices in maybe here, but in the UK it's there. It's really interesting. And the Daily Telegraph ran a headline a couple of months ago that said, cyclists, number of deaths caused by cyclists doubles in Britain last year. What? So I was like, because I work in this area, so I'm like, oh. Okay, how many people have been killed in road traffic collisions in the UK last year? The answer is nearly 2,000. How many do you think are killed by cyclists, so that cyclists are at fault? Correct. 1 in 1,000. It is typically anything between 0 and 4. So the Daily Telegraph headline referred to the fact that last year 1 person was killed. This year 2 people were killed by cyclists. 2 is too many. 2,000 is how many are actually killed, as you can imagine, overwhelmingly by motor traffic. And that's not because motorists are evil people, it's because of kinetic energy. It's all quite simple. So where's the Daily Telegraph in all this? But we can use propaganda techniques of our own. Here's an ethical question, should we? So Chris Boardman, who is a prominent former world champion cyclist and a prominent campaigner for everyday cycling, he says, I don't see any cyclists, I only see people on bikes. And that's really clever. So he's moving away from labeling. You see this stuff here? Labeling, prejudice, stigma, discrimination. That's the root, stereotyping. That's what we all do in our minds when we're not careful enough. That's what we're all capable of. It's how to some extent, we're hardwired as our psychology is to go down these routes. So if you say cyclist, that is a label. You then stereotype. You then move to prejudice, and potentially you move to discrimination. Discrimination is the worst of those evils, when you actively behave in a way that is anti that particular group. So can you get away from that by saying, there's no such thing as a cyclist, there are just people on bikes? What's all this rubbish about labelling someone according to their travel mode? It's ludicrous. And Chris Boardman exposes that. But he's using propaganda of his own. He's reframing. He's framing. And that's powerful, powerful stuff. Marketers do it all the time. Another reason we don't get hugged at parties. But if you want to use humour, you guys can't read this, but it's the Cyclist Hate bingo card, which is created by Carlton Reid, who's an incredibly clever guy. And he says, it's tough to remember all the things you hate about cyclists. So for your next column, blog posting, forum comment, radio show, use this checklist and you won't miss any of the major points. Make sure to mention that all cyclists do some or all of the following. Pick 5 or more points. Choosing contradictory points is fine. And then he's got the big list. Should ride on the pavement, not roads. They ride on the pavement. These are all reasons to hate cyclists. Think they own the road, but roads are for cars, not bikes. Contradictory. Weave in and out of traffic, ride 2 abreast illegally, don't use bells anymore, expect us to jump out of the way when they ring their bells. Clad in lycra, wear stupid wraparound sunglasses, can't afford a car, contradicts with ride an expensive carbon bike. These are all reasons to hate cyclists. Anyway, on and on it goes. And it's Carlton's way of sort of letting off some steam and also having some fun at their expense, and also using, this is a propaganda, our way we just strip away the rubbish, we strip the nonsense and show it up for what it is, and then you can start to win some battles. More positively, ladies and gentlemen, and to finish, we've got the 2 books there that made an impression on me when I read them. Michael Sandel, The Moral Limits of Markets. He's a fantastic, he's a clever guy. And Tom Crompton, Common Cause. So I would recommend them. I think they're really interesting, and I think they're really interesting for us in the world we're in. And they pose questions. That they both talk about the shallows and the deep. The shallows affect the deep. So what's shallow? Shallow values, right? I've recently come across some literature in my field, in road safety, talking about motivational crowding out, the use of incentives to crowd out good moral reasons for doing things or belief system-based things for doing it. Should you incentivize people to change their behavior to save the environment? Should you pay people to save the environment, or should you instill them with a belief system that enables them to make their own decisions? Well, obviously one is clearly the way I've just expressed it. Everyone here is going to put their hand up and say the belief system's a better bet. But hang on a minute, quite often we're using incentive systems of one sort or another, and I am as well in some of my work. So am I doing the right thing? No, I don't know. I'm puzzling over it a fair bit. Because is it okay if our social marketing is aimed at things like hedonism and achievement and power, which is what all too often what commercial marketers aim their messages at? Is it okay if we do that? We quite often do. Hang on a minute. Tom Crompton is criticising us for it. That's interesting. Maybe he's got a point. Should we be looking more at benevolence, universalism, and so on? So that's something to sort of think about in terms of values. So changing values to changing cultures. How are we doing for time? I think if you don't mind, I'll skip that video. Maybe show it another time, and I'll move to the last slide, because I want to finish on time or slightly ahead. And that is here's my uplifting message, because we come to the end. It's been wonderful. I think we have got a lot to be happy about. And I realise I've talked a fair bit in the last 10 minutes or so about propaganda and stuff. And I didn't want anyone to feel a bit down. So I just thought back, and I think back over 40, 50 years to back when I was a child and what the world was like then. And when I was a kid, racism was rampant, right? It was normal. It was normal. Is racism still in existence now? Of course it is. But is it normal? Maybe it's more hidden. We were discussing this over lunch. I hope that racism has decreased in the last... I'm 55, so I'm talking about 45 years ago. The world was a very different place. Drink driving was normal in the 1970s. Getting pissed and driving home was absolutely normal, and it was okay. It is now. Does it still happen? Of course it does. But is it something to celebrate? No. If you get caught drink driving and you go to a drink drive rehabilitation course, you don't tend to tell your friends about it. You're fairly quiet about that. You certainly don't tell your employer. That's changed in my lifetime. What an interesting thing, the whole thing about, I mean, the grid girls thing is interesting, but the whole business of objectification of women and I'm, for obvious reasons, not best placed to talk about this personally, but I do hope and believe that my daughter will grow up in a better world than my mum did, right? From the point of view of just all the straightforward everyday things that the way men and women behave with each other seems to me to be more civilized than it was 45 years ago. We've recently introduced, thanks not least to people like Gerard Hastings, who's in this room, the minimum pricing is coming into Scotland, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Maybe the culture will change. And smoking in public places, of course, is now banned. And that is a big change. 45 years ago, it was normal for a GP to start to light up. This is the doctor lighting up. All right, can I help you? You know, that was normal 45 years ago. And it's I hope, not now. So some uplifting things. Now, I think social marketers are and should be part of the action with this. This is culture change over a long time, and I think the highest call to action for us is to be culture change agents. So I'll love you and leave you with that thought, and then maybe one day we will get hugged at parties.